Hey visionaries, welcome back to the Your Biggest Vision Show. I'm your host, Leah Gervais, and I'm very excited to have this week's guest. She is a friend of mine. She is an incredible entrepreneur, and she's helped me a lot with my own business. We have Erin Armstrong here. Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, I'm going to read a little bit about you, and then we're going to dive in and hear your story. So Erin is the founder and CEO of Enlightened Accounting, LLC, a tax and financial consulting firm that focuses on financially empowering small business owners and female entrepreneurs. Erin's unique approach includes helping people with the nuts and bolts of business finances, such as accounting practices, tax strategy, profitability, budgeting, and cash flow. Simultaneously, she helps her clients identify their financial fears and improve their money mindset so they can move forward in a confident, proactive, and empowered way. Erin's worked with hundreds of business owners across the country in dozens of industries. She's led workshops in LA, New York, Chicago, and other major cities. She's been featured in media such as Connected Women's Magazine, HuffPost, and the Forbes acclaimed She Did It Her Way podcast. So I don't know if you even know this background, Erin, but I just want to tell for my listeners that I found Erin, like most things happen in life, at the exact perfect time when I was really needing her and I didn't even really know it. And for me, it was, I have a CPA. I grew up with a CPA father, so I've always really liked the financial side of business. I know a lot of popular opinion thinks that entrepreneurs don't. It's always been kind of fun for me. But there's this social media trend of people who talk about making money in a very woo-woo way, which is kind of fun and kind of exciting, but not actually how a business totally works. So, there's two parts.
Sure.
And so I was getting frustrated because I felt like I was being taught how to sell better, which was good, but not really construct the back part of my business in a really long-term and big picture way. And I remember thinking about this frustration, and sure enough, then I think I found you on social media.
Oh.
So what I love about Erin and her approach is that she is an accountant. She will give you the honest truth. She will work with you through the numbers, but she also is just such a sweet and optimistic person, and she carries that through when she works with you and teaches about money. It's not like you have to get rid of the positive thinking. It really is both, and that's so aligned with my philosophy. So very happy to have you here, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. So take me back a little bit. I know you're a CPA, and what I really want to hear about is how you went from being an accountant and being a CPA to working in this crazy world of entrepreneurs with really fast-paced entrepreneurs. And where did that start? What was the bridge?
So I have a really unusual story, really unusual. I grew up, as most people do, thinking I was going to do different things. And then by the time I was in high school, I kind of landed on, I was going to be an actress. and that came from my mom had enrolled me in community theater early on and, all this stuff. And so this is I share this because it's a very unusual bridge. I went and studied in New York City, at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts when I was 17. And then I went to LA, and I decided, one of the best decisions of my life, I didn't know it then, but I had this coach, and I remember I was kind of at the time thinking of well, if I was just thinking about performing the rest of my life, I really want to go to a conservatory, and I had some options. But I had in my mind that I also wanted a degree. And it was kind of weird because I really wasn't thinking that's a fallback. It was just for some reason that sounded like I should have a degree. And so I remember bringing this up to her, and she was like, well, if you're open to it, why not have more options later in life? So I was like, oh yeah, that's a good point. And, and so I went and visited Pepperdine University. I loved it. I got off the plane and I was could smell the ocean. I was like, this is a sign. I'm a water person. I just love the water. And so I ended up going there. And while I was in school, it was partially why I had chosen that is because I was in Los Angeles, so I could kind of pursue, I was doing a lot of voiceover work, modeling work. I was trying to put my foot in the acting world, but that didn't really happen until after I graduated. And so for the first few years after graduating, though, I was a working and struggling poor actress. And
the thing.
Yeah, the thing. And the thing about that experience was, like most people, even though I was really blessed to have some, actually more jobs than I'd say a lot of my peers, I didn't I always had like some side stuff going on because I could never rely on income. And so I had a few different creative businesses, and kind of through that process, I had a lot of, and it was cumulative. It wasn't like immediate, but over time, I really got frustrated with the kind of responses I got when I would go to my accountant, when I asked questions that I thought would have like a black and white answer. And then I ended up walking away with an even like more confused feeling than what I had asked. And it kind of, you know, I guess I was naive at the time too. Like I had a personality where I started getting kind of miffed, like, this is ridiculous, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've always had an analytical side at the same time. So I thought eventually I was just like, well, I can figure this out. This can't be that hard. Like, I'll just read some tax law. Now I know that's not normal, but that was just my thinking at the time. Yeah, it was just my thinking. And the funny thing is, I really fell in love with it. And I know that's an unusual thing to say. And so if you're listening to me, please don't discount me immediately. What I thought was so fascinating was that the more I read, the more I was like, this is completely opposite of what I thought, what kind of we've been conditioned as a culture to believe in the sense that what I read when I was like reading the tax code and reading these court opinions, I was like, this is like actually really, we live in a society in the US, we are really set up in a way that the tax law and taxes and all that can really help us as business owners. And it's, you know, if we're listening to just kind of the language out there, it's always like, even when we hear those positive mindset folks, as you were talking about, the law of attraction, which give me some of that every day. Like there's a time and a place for it. And I'm all about that. But you also hear, I work with a lot of folks that are kind of big names in that space online. And they all have this, oh, but taxes are a totally separate thing. And oh, the government's taking all my money. And it's just really a lot of negative stuff. And so I guess that's what excited me is like, I guess it's just because we don't talk about taxes. No one wants to wade into this. And for whatever reason, I'm willing to go here. And so I really just read it in the beginning to like get clarity for myself and what I was doing with the acting, with my small business work. And I started realizing what a financial difference that made for me. So like actually in terms of money, like what was in my pocket. But I also really loved it. Really, I didn't expect this at all. And I think this is why I do the work I do today, is it really gave me like a different level of confidence. And that's a funny thing to say, but I see it happen all the time with people. I think what I didn't know until that point, I like probably many or most people in the US, if you're a woman, you grow up, and then there's a few exceptions, but you take on a lot of negative money stories. Most people grow up not with great financial examples. I grew up in a home that there were so many financial secrets that, you know, as a kid, I was just a kid, so I didn't know any different. But what I've come to realize is how much that ingrained, like kind of even in my personality, just fear was kind of like, it was there when it came to money, you know, and scarcity and like, ooh, bad guys and, you know, and, oh, you can't charge that, you know? And the more I embraced this, just at the time, like I wasn't working in the world of numbers, but it really changed how I was showing up. And I loved that. And it was a really unexpected, like side benefit, you know? And so it really got me curious as to like, well, maybe I want to go a little further with this. And so I started working with other small businesses. Let me clarify this. I'm not a CPA. So I'm in the state of Texas and I'm an enrolled agent. So it's like
oh, my bad.
No. I just want to, for everyone listening. And
you are an accountant. You have an accountant.
Right? Yes. Yeah. And I'm licensed by the IRS.
Right.
So I have some standing there. So I went, and just over time, I just started kind of like, I don't know, I just kind of moved that direction. I kept getting different, you know, certifications and licenses, and it continues to be something that really fuels me up because I love working with the logistical side of numbers. But I think, you know, I certainly work with men, but I'd say the majority of my clients tend to be women. And I think it's because there's this component when we talk about finances where it is partially emotional. It is partially like, what was our experience? What is our experience now? What do we need to work through? And I think we really have to marry the two of those together if we're really going to move forward in a way that's really proactive and really sustaining, at least in the business world.
Right, right. Wow, what an amazing, I love the way you put it. That makes so much sense to me, just how you found something that gave you confidence and you followed that. And, I know every time I've had to do difficult financial things in my own life, the two that come to mind are student loans. I had student loans when I went to college, and my business obviously has been something that is not necessarily something one person should be handling on their own, but you do because it's what you need to do.
Yeah.
And it can be daunting at times, but when you really sit down, and even thanks to you, like I sit down every single Friday morning, I go through all my receipts, all my sales of the week, I count everything that I have made a sale on, everything that I have spent on. And of course, there are sometimes when you're like, wow, I spent more this week than I wanted to, or I don't really want to do this. But every time after, I'm always like, you know what? I'm so proud of myself that I did that because I know what's going on. And I think that that's really where the lack of control comes in and the lack of confidence happens, is because you're blindsiding yourself to a really important part of your business and even your life. So I love that you just started feeling more confident in general. When did you start Enlightened Accounting, or when did you really get into this niche?
I need to go back and look at exact dates, but it was either 2011. I was thinking about that this morning. I think it was 2011 that I officially started a business. You know what I mean?
Got it. So you were sort of like freelance helping for a little while?
Yes, for a few years before that. But I think 2011 was the year that I was like, here's an LLC. Eventually I could be S Corp, but that was like, okay, this is a thing.
Yes. And so what were the first type of services you officially offered when you started it?
So way back in the day, I did a lot of bookkeeping and a lot of what they would call historical bookkeeping. So it's kind of like a little bit more specialized in bookkeeping. It would be like someone who hadn't filed with the IRS for like 5 years and didn't have any records. And so they needed to recreate everything, and then you would help them with the tax filing. So that is not the kind of job I do today.
It was not that fun.
But it was such a great learning experience. Like it made me even more curious about things that happen with taxes. It was also like, it made me think preventatively. So now I work with people. I mean, sometimes sure, I work with people that might be a year or so behind, but it made me think about what are the things you need to be thinking about, because these were people in general that tended to be very successful, at least as far as sales go. Mm-hmm. And then they just were like, oh, okay, I'm just going to run with it, which is awesome.
Right.
Until they got in trouble. And that can't be a good feeling. And, so it just made me think, it made me think in terms of productivity. I did a lot of work with QuickBooks back in the day, still do. But back then, QuickBooks Online wasn't a thing. So, it was like desktop, although I figured out a way to like remotely log in to people and that was cool. But now everything's QuickBooks Online, which is awesome. And then it just gradually like morphed. I started feeling more comfortable with like giving. Actually, what kind of happened is even in the bookkeeping services, people would start, asking me more questions, and I would feel more confident, like saying, hey, I noticed this. Let's not do that. Like, I think you should do it this way, or have you thought about this? Or, and so it was really fertile ground, because nowadays I don't offer just like bookkeeping as a service, but it really gave me an idea of what people aren't necessarily thinking about, but need to be thinking about, because often they think, oh, if I've got it in QuickBooks Online, or if I've got a bookkeeper, that's enough. And it's a great step, but it's not necessarily, that's not all we need to be thinking about. Yeah, right.
So what would you say the majority of what you do now is? You're a virtual CFO for businesses?
Yes. So the majority of the work I do right now is like kind of virtual CFO stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's businesses that are successful and then a certain level, usually close to the million, several 100,000, but they need help figuring out how to make it more profitable and how to kind of take it to the next level. But I also do a lot of consulting with smaller business owners that, I don't know, are somewhere, they're not at the very beginning of their career, like they might be making like, at least a professional wage to like 70,000 up. And then you start having questions. And I think you alluded to this too. Like, I think that's where you were at when we started talking. So I do consulting now, like where we might look at people, this morning I had a conversation with someone who has built a really successful business in at least terms as creating like this brand and having regular sales, but her profit margin, like what she had left over was just not good. But the exciting thing is just with a few tweaks, she's going to have enough cash flow to feel really taken care of. And part of that's marrying in the tax stuff, and part of it's marrying in, how you are handling the money. So it's kind of all the pieces tied together.
Right. So if someone comes to you and they are kind of looking for that consultation phase, if they're someone like me where it's like, okay, I've started getting, I think that, for me, it was like, I'm almost to six figures and I need to be more in control of what's going on. Right. Or someone, I know you've referred to this, and I know you can't disclose too much, but you've worked with some really big influencers and entrepreneurs out there. What are some of the most common mistakes you see people make, and things you just wish other people knew about sooner, or the things?
Yeah, sure. So a few things. One thing I really don't like, I think this is around in our US culture, but then it's definitely around in the online space, is kind of like more, like the more sales I make, the better the more important I am, the better I am. That can be true, but so often people aren't thinking about long-term or even their expenses at the time, because, yes, I'm not going to disclose anything, but I've seen behind the scenes of some of these really well-known brands that if you're on the online space at least, that we really know and love. And this isn't to shame anyone or anything like that, but there's just, you hit $1 million, but what do you have left to show for it? And so I think that's where sometimes, especially in the beginning or for the first few years, it's really easy to get hooked onto like, I want to make six figures, or I want to make multiple six figures. And there's nothing wrong with having any of these goals. Like, that's amazing. Go for it. But that's not the ultimate, because you have to be thinking, well, what am I going to get out of it? And actually, that brings me to another pattern that's been really prevalent this year. I feel like I've worked with a lot of female business owners specifically who are making really well with, at least as far as sales go, but they aren't. I see the business as it has to be mutual. Like, you need to give to your business, but your business needs to give back to you. Like, you can't just be taking all the responsibility, spending all your time. You need to be receiving something back in return. So, and I'm talking about really financially, but I've seen where a lot of people have created this kind of amazing business, but they aren't really prioritizing themselves. And sometimes you hear people say like profit first. So I think realizing that, maybe with the exception of when you're first getting started, like when you don't really have cash flow, and that's different for everyone, whether that's 6 months, a year, but knowing that you have to start paying yourself. And it's not even, I'm not talking from a tax or accounting standpoint. It's purely to feel like on an energetic level where you don't start building that resentment of like, because
working all the time, right?
Working all the time, and you're like, what do I have to show for it? Because you can always raise the benchmark. You can be like, oh, well, when I make $100,000, then I'll pay myself. Right. When I make $200,000, I've worked with a few this year who made $1 million and still weren't paying themselves. Right. And you're like, well,
when is this going to start?
Let's do this now.
I totally agree. And I've had moments of that. I have had a point in my business where I was like, oh my God, I'm working all the time and I have to shift the way that I'm allocating resources because this is not sustainable. But on the flip side, one of the things that I think is so cool about entrepreneurship, and especially some of the more lifestyle influence businesses that we have online these days, I have one, is that how do I say this without sounding, I just don't want to, how do I be clear? You can deduct a lot from your taxes, from your lifestyle. Like, this is totally legal, so I'm comfortable saying it. I have an office in my apartment that I'm at right now, and I deduct the portion of the office that I'm at right now that I pay for rent every month from my taxes. You kind of have the benefit of being able to do these kinds of things, which when I was at my 9-to-5 job, I certainly didn't have to do. that makes my profit margin go down though. So it is kind of like there's two sides of it, you know, and I struggled with that in the early days when I was like first getting to six figures. I'm like, oh, I want my profit margin to be so big, but I also don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah.
I really don't need to be paying taxes on.
For sure. It's a yin and a yang because I love what you said. And that's kind of what, like, to the home office. I know we've talked about it before, and I'm a big believer in taking the home office deduction. And that's one of those things. It's like, I think that's one of the things that excited me when I started reading the tax code. It's like, you know, it's really set up in a way that if you are a business owner, you do get a lot of financial benefit. Now you want to make sure you meet the criteria and that sort of thing.
Right. Do it legally.
But if you don't get to do that as an employee, so that automatically kind of bumps up the income you receive, even albeit indirectly.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Well, it does, but it also makes it's kind of another expense that you might not be putting through your business. So it also can make your whatever. We're talking about the same thing, but I love that you bring up both points, because on the one hand, it is very important to make sure that you aren't, I mean, I don't know. I think in the beginning, the way I did it anyway, and I'm not perfect, but I think that there's more than one way to do things. My profit margin, for all of you listening out there, you know, you do spend more, I think, in the beginning. You have to invest in your business. You have to get things off the ground. You have to learn how to do things. But, you know, I think it's important to come to a time where, just like you're saying, you stop raising this artificial benchmark of when you're going to stop investing in that way, spending in that way, not paying yourself in that way. And I think that it's so amazing that you bring up that point, because in the earlier days, you can't even imagine what it's like to make six figures or $250,000. And you think, once I make that much, everything will be fine. But to your point, some people are at seven figures and they're still in that same dynamic. So it's worth paying attention to pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm going to go back to your original question. I think I think you're saying, what are some big things to be aware of?
Yeah, or just mistakes or things you wish people knew.
Yeah, I think sometimes in the beginning too, and it's totally understandable, everyone's excited about what they're doing, because the whole point that you're starting a business or side hustle is usually it's like a passion or it's your calling, you know, you're testing the waters, right?
Right.
And of course that takes most of your bandwidth. But I wish people made kind of at least a baseline of financial literacy a little bit more of a priority before it gets too big of a scale. Because I think, you know, so even though I was in the accounting world, I was able to put some of these practices into my business pretty early on, or even had ideas I didn't live in New York City. I did need a car. And I was like, at the time I was driving this really old Honda Civic, and I was like, well, when it's time to replace my car, it's going to be through the business, because I met the criteria of what would be a business car. And so a year and a half later, I was like, yeah, I felt pretty awesome, buying it through my business as a business vehicle. And not that, I mean, sometimes I give that example and people are like, well, I don't have 40,000, you know, whatever it is, but it's not really about the money. It's sometimes I think we think, oh, we'll know when we get to that stage, I guess, sort of like the paying yourself. But it can really help you to just you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a professional by any means. But if you just start getting awareness of oh, okay, well, yeah, I know what income and expenses are. What is this thing called the balance sheet, and what does it show? And, you know, because your accountant is going to ask about a few things every year come tax time on that. And if you ever need a loan from a bank or bring in a partner, there are some really basic principles that kind of you know, if you don't know, it's not going to be the end of the world, but you're not going to feel really confident in those conversations, because then it's I don't know what it is. And
right. Well, one of the things I see my clients freeze up the most about is the quarterly tax filings for those of us that are self-employed. And I think it really is incredible to see. And I'm saying this as someone who used to be a little more freaked out than I am now. You know, you can feel so confident doing the work you do with your clients, doing your thing, doing your zone of genius. And then it's you have to pay an estimated, keyword estimated, you can go to jail if it's the wrong number.
Right.
Still estimated amount. And everyone's like, It's like they can't even move. And
Yeah.
so, you know, that kind of energy, I think, is really what you alluded to about people just feeling out of control. And so for a specific example like that, where you know, you have to pay these quarterly taxes, how do you help people get over this fear of like, if you make the wrong amount, you know, it's the IRS is not going to come after you and kill you, knock on wood.
No.
But like, that's how it feels to some people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yes. No, I know that's how most people feel. I will let you in a secret. I'm not immune, even being certified by or licensed by the IRS. I'm not immune to like, I remember, I think it was like 2 months ago, I went to my mail center and I opened the box and I saw IRS and I was like, oh, am I going to be audited? Like, because it was unexpected. I was like, what could that be? In the end, it was like an address change, like a hyphen changed, and they let me know. So thank you. But it was even, I actually thought this is a great example that it's not, however our society is, it is really universal, because I would think truly by now that I would not be like, even if I was audited, okay, I'm pretty confident that I know how to handle that since I've watched so many other people through it. But still, it was just like a moment for me too. And I think what we just have to realize is, you know, I mean, a few things. There's no magic cure-all for having fear of the IRS, but I think there's a few things that people might appreciate, like me bringing up. One is, you know, what can help you at least in feeling better about paying taxes, even though you still might not like it, is, you know, I just look around sometimes and I think, wow, public school, wow, there's this amazing park, wow, you know, like I know we don't all agree with the government or the current administration or whatever it is. We're never going to all agree on what's going on. But even so, our tax dollars do go to all of us having a better life. So I think, you know, if we can just bring that in and feel that, sometimes that's a very different than like, oh, it's eating my money and it's this abstract, like dark thing.
Right. I love that. I have to tell myself about that with New York City all the time because the taxes are insane.
Yes. Yeah. You live in a place where they're very high.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very, very high.
Yes. And then another thing, I think that people don't, because the fear is just kind of prevalent in our culture, you know, most people, if I ask, know someone that got audited and they just talk on and on about what a horrible experience it was and has the most stressful thing in their life and blah, blah, blah. It might have been for that person. But one, you can do things that are preventative. But two, even if you get like a letter in the mail saying you're being audited, like 99 out of 100 times, it's over it'll tell you it's a very specific piece. It'll in every kind of letter is different, but it's not like, oh, you're being audited for all these years, we need all your books, and oh, you did this. Now it might say you owe $100,000, which would feel really scary if you're not planning for it. But if you ever find yourself in that position, make sure you go work with like an enrolled agent. Some CPA offices specialize in tax litigation. There's also tax specialists, tax lawyers, that will do that. And you will probably have to pay them something, but here's the thing. So often, if you try to represent yourself before the IRS, and I don't say this to be scary, I just say it to be helpful. People have so much fear themselves that they can't listen. I've seen this happen a few times to what's being said by the auditor. And so they start handing all this extra information out, which then expands the audit. And then it really does become this monster. And to be honest, I mean, yeah, auditors talk in what would be a little bit more accounting jargon or tax jargon. So it's not going to be something the average person's really comfortable with. But if you go with someone and are like, hey, I got this letter, I am afraid to call about it, but I don't think this is right. Could you, if you have the in-between person that has the right to represent you before the IRS, those conversations go much more smoothly, and sometimes they just disappear because sometimes it's just a small misunderstanding, or sometimes it is like, okay, we need to find this one statement and let's provide it. But it's not like, it doesn't automatically explode into this horrible
in your life.
No.
Right. And I love what you're doing. This is a technique I do all the time with my clients with all the things, is chasing a fear. So you have this fear of being audited. Maybe that's what phrases you up about the IRS. Okay. So if you get audited, then you just gave us several options that you can do. it sounds like for the most part, it could be figured out pretty quickly, especially if you get someone who knows what they're doing and can represent you in front of the IRS. It would probably not be the most fun time in your life, but that is literally, the funhouse mirror version of what's actually going on, which is just a little bit of a blimp. It's not like this huge, scary monster, and then if you do owe the IRS something, then you pay it. If you don't have the money, there's a payment plan. Like, it's not like you guys,
for sure. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up payment plans too, because that is something that I think most people don't know about. Like, no one has ever been hauled off by the IRS that has been on a payment plan. And they are very generous. Like, so it's not like
you're not going to jail.
No, the only people that go to jail are people that have literally hidden money and it's been fraudulent. Like
hundreds of thousands of dollars of fraudulent taxation.
Yeah, or they don't pay after many conversations, like long periods of time. So, that doesn't happen overnight.
Right.
It happens over a long process.
And it's a malicious thing. And I think that that's what a lot of my clients don't really or they forget, is that if you're doing the best you can, if you are, being genuine, you're trying to learn, people that really get in trouble for tax issues are people that are criminals. They know what they're doing is very wrong. It's not like, oh my God, I accidentally charged a meal. And
No. Like worst case scenario, they're like, oh, you shouldn't have charged those meals. And then you pay the small amount of taxes on it. It's like, okay.
Okay, let's move on to something a bit more positive. So,
all right.
Because I feel like we're trying to make
let's be positive.
Like jail, criminals, like that's not really where I'm trying to go. But anyway, another one of my favorite things that I've learned from you and that I think you really empower business owners, especially self-employed business owners, to do is save for retirement and think about some of the retirement plans. And I know that was one of the hardest things for me to navigate when I left my 9-to-5 job to be self-employed. I had a 403B. I also have been saving with my Roth IRA for several years, which I can still do. What do you think is the best place for people to start if they're recently going from a 9-to-5 to self-employed? They do not have any sort of 401k, 403b within their own organization, and they don't even know where to begin to save for retirement.
Well, if they haven't done anything, I think a Roth is the easiest entry point, but you're limited to that every year.
Right.
Like majorly. But if you want to contribute it, I mean, every little bit counts. So if you haven't done anything,
could you do like a sentence or two of what the Roth IRA looks like?
Yeah. So
I know most people probably know, but it's better safe than sorry.
Yeah. So, and now I'm like embarrassed. I should have looked at my numbers. It's been so long since I've looked at them. So I want to say it's like, isn't it 6,000 a year? Yeah. 6,000.
5,500.
5,500. Actually, they bumped it up this year. So I do know more than I thought. Okay. Kind of like out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes you're like, wait a second. So you can contribute to that. And that's like its own thing. I mean, that might sound silly, but that is completely separate than all the other retirement contributions.
Right.
Yeah. And that's why it's the easiest to contribute to if you have never contributed to anything, because basically you just Google a bank that does it and they set you up and you just put your money in and you're good to go. Then you have some really lucrative options, which is goes back to how you could really have financial benefits as a self-employed business owner, as opposed to working at your 9-to-5. There's a lot of ins and outs. And I know, Leah, you know this, because I spent an hour talking about it one day and probably our eyes were all rolling back because there's so much. But the gist of it is, you have to be aware, because you do have to take into account things like, do I have an employees? Will I have an employees, years, a year from now? And how much do I want to be contributing possibly to their accounts? But the reality is, as a business owner, you can contribute like $56,000 a year. And yes, I did say 56,000, because I always get someone after I say that, they'll email me like, did you really say that? Yes, I did. And that's because you actually have the possibility of contributing both as the employee and the employer.
Amazing.
Yeah, which is amazing. And I don't know any employer out there that matches that, where you could possibly have that in your account. So I think it's, that is one of the things too, that is people who work for themselves are often like, oh man, I'm screwed because I can't contribute to retirement. I'm like, no. Let's back up. You actually have it better. And depending on how your legal structure set up, that can actually be like 100% deduction for your business. So you're lowering your taxes too. Now that, just to be clear, that's not across the board because there's all these pieces that come into play. But just think if you, I don't know, had 100,000 in profit and then you subtract 57, and then so you're paying taxes not on 100,000 anymore, you're paying taxes like as the business owner of the business on 43.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty great.
Yeah.
So, and you just saved a huge amount for your retirement.
For retirement,
so,
invested a lot. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're interested, I'd say talk to a financial planner or come talk to me about it. But yeah, but there's a lot. I will say what is confusing is there's a lot of pieces that have to be taken into consideration when you start talking about retirement or individual retirement stuff.
Right, right. Wow. Well, you are just a wealth of knowledge. I always am so inspired talking to you. I nerd out about numbers too. So you are like always speaking my language. But I think what I love about it, as we've kind of said throughout this all, is how much of a position of power you're able to put your clients in and entrepreneurs in through this work. And I just think that that's amazing. And it really, you know, on a bigger level, brings back so many of our whys. I know a big why for me as an entrepreneur is having the flexibility to spend time with my very soon to be husband, which is insane.
Yay!
And, you know, to plan our family and our future the way we want. And that has to do with everything you're talking about here. So it can feel really fun to work for yourself and have, you know, a location independent business. But if you're not putting in the actual structure to foster those bigger picture goals, you're kind of missing a piece of the puzzle. So this is what really excites me about it. And I love it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It's been so fun talking to you, as always.
I know, as always, I love chatting with you. I have a few lightning round questions for you. Are you ready?
Okay. All right.
What's your go-to as a business owner when you're just having a bad day or stuff just goes totally wrong?
I lay on my acupuncture mat.
I love that.
And, sometimes I listen to guided meditation, but sometimes I just lay there on my acupuncture mat. That's enough to
That's good.
Reset.
Love that. Cool. What are you most proud of in your career so far?
I think that I've done it my way.
Love that.
You know, I've had some challenges over the years figuring out exactly how to make what I want to do work. And I think that's true for anyone in business, but when you finally get there, it just feels wonderful. Yeah.
It's all paid off. Yeah. And do you have an inspirational or go-to podcast or book regarding business?
Oh, that's a good one.
It's okay if not.
You know, I think I'm not going to give an answer because there's there's not one guiding light to me. Although I love listening and reading to new things, but yeah, there's not one that just sings to me. Yeah.
I love that. Awesome. All right. Well, I know you have, the way I first got in touch with you is that you have an amazing checklist of tax deductions for self-employed entrepreneurs, or even for people that are side hustling but have their own business.
Yeah.
So if you want to share with us where people can find out this checklist.
Sure. So that's erinarmstrong.com/tax-deductions-checklists.
Fabulous. And we will put that in the show notes. And what about social media? Where else can people find out about you?
I'm most active on Instagram. So if you just look for Erin Armstrong, I'll pop up there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Erin. This was hugely inspirational and helpful, and you're just the best.
Thank you, Leah. It's been so fun talking to you, and I'm really honored to get to be on your podcast.
Oh, it's my pleasure. All right, visionaries, I hope you found this as helpful as I did. I hope that you have some sort of action piece you can take away from this, that whether that's you're going to get QuickBooks or you're going to measure your desk at home and you're going to deduct it from your taxes or whatever it is. All of this is great to learn, but better to apply. So I have faith that this will help in fostering your biggest vision. We will talk to you soon. Thank you guys all so much.